Okay, so I think I mentioned at the end of the last video, I needed to do a part two on living when we lived at the house by Patoka River. There's a lot of things. I guess we lived there longer than I was thinking. And of course, the older I get, the more memories I have. I have in my mind because you can remember more. And this is, I think I also mentioned this was kind of an important time in my life. And living by the Patoka River. Dad, at this time, I think Dad had stopped drinking. I don't remember him drinking at this time, so maybe by this time he had stopped drinking. And it was somewhere during the time we lived here that he got one of his first jobs with the city of Huntingburg. One of his first jobs, he was working at the power plant, what we call the power plant in town. Yeah, that's right. Because he had stopped drinking. Funny thing, yeah, he had stopped drinking. We actually had stopped drinking when, at the house on Highway 64. Because one of the first jobs, he was always seemed to have a part-time job. One of the first jobs he had was a bartender at the Colonial Inn at the time. I think our songers or whatever they called it there was a couple of different names that went by, but he was a bartender there. After he quit drinking, I was like, oh, that's like, as time would go on, I would think, how rough was that? You're not drinking anymore, yet you're working there. So I'm not sure how, but anyway, he was able to get a job there part-time. So he was a bartender there. That was one of his first jobs. And then he was able to, while we were out by living in the house by Patoka River, my aunt, Myrtle, was married to Bert King. Bert King, I don't remember exactly what he did, but he worked for the city, and he was able to get Dad on a job at the power plant in the city working the night shift. And so I'm pretty sure he had stopped drinking at this time. That's why he was able to get a job there. And so this is the beginning. That turned out to be pretty a big event in his life, in our life, because that would later lead to his getting a job as the city or town gas superintendent. He ran the whole city natural gas. He was the boss. He was in charge of everything. So once the alcohol was gone out of his life, he was obviously the talents and abilities that he had became, came to the top, and he was able to get the job with the city, which he was ultimately able to keep and retire from later on. So that's something. And we did, of course, at this time, but if I haven't mentioned, we hadn't gone through a time where we never had a vehicle. We did have a Ram. I think when we were out there on Highway 64, we had a Rambler. I think it was one of the first cars we had. And then by the time we're living in this house by the Patoka River, he had a 1962 Ford stick shift on the column. And he also had that old pickup truck. I think I mentioned that I actually learned to drive on. Okay, so now this is a time where music really, really enters in my life. And I'm really interested in music. And I'm like, the Beatles are here. Now all these English groups and stuff, and all the American groups it's just starting to become big. And I, of course, like to sing. So I was like, that's like, if I could do that would be great. If I could be in a band and sing in a band, wow, that would be great. And of course, as I mentioned before, I met Ed, who was a drummer, and then Mike played guitar, Noble Hockmeister, and later on, a little bit later than here. But yeah, we were still in this house when when I got into the first band with Mike and Hockmeister, Hawk, as we would call him. And so anyway, also one of the first jobs I had was I worked for the Western Auto store in town. The Western Auto, it's a hardware store. And I guess at one time when Western Auto started, that was a pretty big national chain of auto supply, auto accessory stores throughout the nation. But basically, they were, but by this time they were much more of a local hardware store. Still did auto parts and stuff, but not like a Napa or anything you would think of like today's auto supply store. And was ran by Louis Martin. Louis would hire a young high school boy to come work, especially during the summer. And when you got off school, he would go there. So I would get a few hours a day and then some hours on Saturday to work there. And so I was able to make a little bit of money working at the store there. Louis Martin he was an alcoholic. Once I had worked there a couple of weeks in the store, and he trusted me, he would I found out the real reason why I was there is because he needed a chance. He needed to be able to get away during the day to go to Black Robes across the street and go get his drink. And but he was an alcoholic. After a couple of years into that, Louis would actually pass away. I don't know what, but I don't know what caused his death, but I'm pretty sure it had something to do with the alcohol. So it could have been cirrhosis. And when we were cleaning out the store, we found I don't know how many half bottles, fifth bottles of whiskey that were hidden in that store that I guess he'd buy a bottle, bring it in, hide it somewhere, and forget where he hid it. And that's also why he didn't like me cleaning up things. He got one day after I started work there, he got really mad at me one day. He had gone out and I thought, well, I'll clean up this area, especially around the cashier. It was always a mess, And I cleaned it up and he came back and he got really mad at me. I didn't tell you to clean that up. I don't know where anything's at now. I thought he would be happy because it was all neat and stuff, but he wasn't happy. So anyway, but that was, I did work at the Western Auto Store. Also, during this time, well, wait a minute, let me put that. I kind of wrote down a couple of things I wanted to, cars we had, and that, okay. I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm trying to remember. There's some things I thought of later on that happened. Also, I told you, the thing about Ed was he had an uncle, my friend Ed Ikes, had an uncle who lived in Indianapolis. Now, I don't remember exactly how this went, but recently Indianapolis 500 we just had that, every May. So his uncle had come down was living in Indianapolis, had come down from Indianapolis and was moving somewhere. I don't remember exactly where he was moving to Huntingburg or moving to another house in Indianapolis. Anyway, he had asked Ed to come up and help him move, do some moving, or take something up there anyway. And so I had never been in Indianapolis before. And so this also happened to be at the time where the time trials were going on. And at that time, the time trials, that was a big thing just to go watch the Indy cars qualification, the weeks of qualification. So Ed, and you had to pay something to get in there, but Ed paid my way in that. And while we were up there, this happened during the time we were helping his uncle up in Indianapolis. So we went to the time trials. So sometimes I forget that. I always think I've never been able to the race. Well, I haven't actually been to the race, but I have been to the time trials. And I remember how fast I was sitting there in the stands and watching those cars go by. It was like just this blur. They were, even at that time, they were 190, 200 miles an hour, 202, 204. And they would go, if you were sitting there, they would go by in front of you, it'd just be a big blur. So, I have been to the Indianapolis 500 track. I don't remember it a lot, but I remember those cars. And also, we won't get into that. Also, the next job I had after Western Auto was I worked for the Hunter's Bowl, the bowling alley there. So my job was what they call a pin chaser. Anyway, you'd spend most of your time behind the machines in the evening when the leagues were on, when most bowling was going on, the leagues were on. And just there was cleaning that had to be. We were actually cleaning. It was crazy. You probably couldn't do that nowadays because of probably laws, preventive safety laws. But I was actually cleaning these machines while they were working, you know. And sometimes the pins had to, you know, the guys would be bowling, and they'd bowl, and then there was you'd have to reset some pins. The pins would fall down or something, and there had to be some pins reset, or so you'd have to shut the machine down long enough to reset the pins where they were supposed to be. Or sometimes, I don't know, I just remember this, but they did what we called like a one, I think the term was a 180. Anyway, the machines would jam, and you'd have to clear the jams and get the machine going again. A lot of times the balls would get stuck back there, and you'd have to get the ball out, so it would hit the return right and turn. So I worked that job up until I graduated from high school, as a matter of fact, because I worked there for a little while after I graduated from high school, and it was during that time. But that was when I had already moved into town. So yeah, okay. So that's kind of, there's a few extra things I wanted to add about that time by the Patoka River. And that's the last house we lived in before we moved into town. Also at this time, one other thing. Yeah, if I didn't mention it before, this was a time when I got to go to the canteen in town. And canteen is still one of the, that was like, I think you had to be 13 or something. You had to be a teenager to go to the canteen. It was like a teen center. Maybe I mentioned this before, so if I did, then you have to, I'm having a moment. But it was the teen center. And I got to go. I remember being able to go there, and so and that was a big event when I could go there in town. So okay, so the next I'll talk about which just kind of things that they seem to be overlapping to me in my mind. I can't remember if we were in Patoka, house by Patoka River, or in town, so they kind of overlap. We're getting into some times in my mind they start to overlap. I guess there was just a lot of things happening at this time, and so. But we'll get into the rest of it as my school years. On the next video, I'll do one when we moved into town. And that's the time when I got my driver's license, and a lot of things changed then. So I'll get into that. Okay, the song I'm going to do is a song that I love to do. We used to do this in a band that I was with Mike and Hawk and the rest of them. And it was like, today, again, they would call this we were doing the cover song. Anyway, I don't know. Like I said before, we didn't say it. That's not what we call it. We just did the song. This was a song you almost, everybody, when you had a band at that time, and you were doing songs, you had to have this. It had to be. It's one of those songs that had to be in there. There's a half a dozen or so, maybe a dozen so songs that everybody expected to hear. And these were big. The song was called "The House of the Rising Sun," and it was done by Eric Burton and the Animals at the time. Now. It was a huge song, big song, and I like it. It's one of those songs that's like, I find this hard, for me, it was hard not to like the song, and I think that was the way most young people felt anyway about the song. If you look this song up now, it doesn't have, you can't find who the original writer was. So there's a lot of when I started looking at this recently on the internet and YouTube and stuff, this is just kind of strange because you can trace this back to way back into the early 1900s sometimes. There's a song that has similar words and it sounds almost the same. You can actually, and then there's the songs that came out in the 50s and before it. Lyrics were a little bit different. It sounded almost the same. There's also a sound. Eric Burton and the Animals were from England, and there's a song, a really, really old song over there that some of the words sound the same and some of the sound. So it's like, it's kind of to me it became, when I started checking on it, it sounded like a mysterious song with the where this song came from and the other words. And it's also is like there's a kind of a blues version that was sung by a female American singer at one time. It's like, so it was a song and the lyrics themselves are kind of a mystery. What does it mean? Is it about a jail? Is it about a house of prostitution? Is it about, what is it? What is the House of the Rising Sun? But anyway, it gets into. But anyway, it was a big song. I mean, about 1964, 1965, and every rock band, rock and roll band that played anywhere, any local band, garage band, whatever you want to call it, anyway, whatever, pop, whatever, did this song, and we did this song. And but I just like to sing the song. I like singing the song, and so that's why I used to do it at home on my guitar. Now, unfortunately, I'm not the guitar player. I'm not a very good guitar player, and never was. So I can't really do it justice on the guitar. But so you have to put up with that. But I'll do the best I can. But I like to sing this song. I've always liked it when the band I was in did it, and I just like to sit and play it the best I could on my guitar and sing it. So that's the song I'm gonna do. There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy, and God, I know I'm one. My mother was a tailor. She sewed my new blue jeans. My father was a gambling man down in New Orleans. Now the only thing a gambler needs is a suitcase and his trunk, and the only time that he's satisfied is when he's all drunk. I got one foot on the station, I got one foot on the train. I'm going back to New Orleans to wear that ball and chain. Yes, there is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many